be giving you his best version of the show of another person here in this audience.
I'm not quite ready yet. I'm just going to need a moment to get into character.
Oh. You didn't bring the ponytail.
I was going to say you need the pigtails for sure.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Oh. Nope. Wow.
It's much better.
Oh, well. I guess you get the idea. So. That Melanie Gall. So there I was, performing Damn It Jim, I'm a Comedian, Not a Doctor, at the Orlando Fringe Festival. Charming little festival filled with lovely little people who enjoyed my fluffy little comedy about alcoholism and abuse and Fight Club and Star Trek. Of course, I had rehearsed the thing to within an inch of its life and memorized the whole thing down to the last syllable. Really, to the point that I was fairly bored by the whole process. It was hard getting any energy revved up, and a couple of times I almost nodded off on stage. But you know, I muddled my way through. And the people, you know, the little people, did seem to enjoy the whole, you know, spirit of the thing, and really seemed to like it, in spite of the sort of, you know, somnambulant manner in which I would stumble through the whole sordid tale. Of course, if you must know, the whole thing goes back to the very first one-woman show that I did, that I created, which incidentally had been called Odd Al Saved My Life. That all goes back, you know, to my perfectly dreary existence and my forlorn childhood under the stern rule of my bitch of a mother, during which my only escape seemed to be to sneak a transistor radio into my pillowcase, drifting off to sleep while listening to the dulcet tones of the Mr. Demento radio hour as he featured the musical stylings of Alfred Matthew Yankovic, known occasionally among his followers and aficionados under the rubric Strange Al. This was, of course, the briefest little divertissement, a 20-minute something that I simply threw together for the sake of an appearance at SoloCom in New York City. Of course, the SoloCom appearance had been preceded by a series of appearances in the early years of the 2010s in the context of the Will Short's American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, a contest of brains in which I was repeatedly to score in the top 500. Well, anyway, not that I needed the money, darling, but there was a slight discount on lodging at that tournament for anyone who was willing to make an appearance at the talent show portion of these festivities. Of course, I presented my own song parodies each year that I attended, and year after year they simply came to expect me to return with my own brand of lyrical expression. But once I started to come for SoloCon, there simply wasn't any way of doubling back to New York twice in a single year. So I'm afraid I left behind my burgeoning career as a parody song stylist to embrace the world of solo performance. Where was I? Oh yes! Following my success with Bizarre Al Saved My Life, I actually found myself attending one of his concerts. He invited me backstage, of course. He had heard so much about me from some hundreds and hundreds of tweets that I had tagged him in, and the poor man could scarcely contain himself when I walked in. "Polly Esther," he cried, "Polly Esther, it's really you!" He was, of course, dreadfully worked up about the whole thing, practically hyperventilating and breaking into tears. I let him take a couple of photos with me, but simply had to continue on my way. The dear man, he called after me. Keep going, Polly. Keep going. Anyway, fast forward to the 2018 Orlando Fringe Festival, during which I told the tale of how I was to play a featured role at another one of those confabulations put together in honor of one of those popular science fiction series. It was actually a rather big to-do in Las Vegas, where, of course, I brought the house down with a tearful portrayal of a sad, alcoholic woman. It was the highlight of the weekend for simply everyone, and subsequent years found us returning again and again, throwing a special soiree in the hotel suite for the friends of Bill Shatner. Of course, I was the hit of the Fringe, and the people were so darling that I resolved then and there to come back and do it again and again and again. I don't know exactly what kind of presentation I would bring the following year, but something always seems to come to me, so I set those thoughts aside for later in the summer. Of course, it was later in the summer that my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. I was being Facebooked and Instagrammed and tweeted and messaged with one fan after another saying, "Did you hear about Peculiar Al? Did you hear about Peculiar Al?" I assumed that the poor fellow had passed away, of course. Sorry to say, because he was a sweet little chap. But that turned out to be not the case at all. Mr. Al had been awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Pip, pip, how very lovely. It certainly would be nice to drop in on the occasion, but given that my assets have been tied up in this or that commodities market, there was simply no way to divert my funds for such a frivolous occasion. It was then that my dear friend Dina suggested that I engage in this new thing that they call crowdfunding, in which you encourage your many followers and supporters to throw money your way. The way that Dina explained it, it seems that most people have this emotional response called empathy, in which they respond with something that they call generosity, in which they simply throw money at you to fulfill some lifelong wish, like flying to Hollywood to stare at a piece of concrete. Suckers. And so that's what I did. And they gave me money. A lot of money. And there were many contributors, but I'm not going to tell you their names because I've just got a minute left, and that's what programs are for. And so I went. I dropped in on the event where, of course, they wined and dined and feted, well, maybe not so much wined, but they dined and feted me with a glorious American cuisine that they call a taco bar. There in the Viper Room, of course, I drew the attention of Dr. Dementor and Peculiar Al's agent, Jay Levy. Dear Peculiar Al was, of course, greatly touched by my presence. The poor man was sobbing like a schoolgirl, calling after me, "Keep going, Polly, keep going." And then I flew back and threw this little program together, and here I am. Thank you. Good night.